All right. Hi, everybody. How are we doing? So we're going to have a 45-minute AMA on AGI Doom. I'm happy to start taking questions right away, so just put them in. All right. A lot of people signing up. As soon as the questions come, we'll start talking. Let's see. This is probably the source of the bet that I talk about the most. It's my one with Eliezer Yudkowsky on the extinction of humanity. Most people are just stunned by the idea. How can you bet on the extinction of humanity? You'll be extinct, so how could you possibly win? The answer, of course, is that you bet on the extinction of humanity by having the optimist prepay the pessimist, which is just what I did with Eliezer. Gave him $100 back in 2017, and if the world ends, he doesn't have to pay me back, so he can enjoy that $100 during the twilight years of the human race. Whereas if and when we're actually, at least some of us are still alive, then he owes me 200 inflation adjusted dollars. So this means that you can totally bet on doom scenarios. The only limitation is that this requires trust between the partners, because if a total stranger wanted to do this bet with me and said, if you give me $100,000, I'll give you $1 million if the world doesn't end, I wouldn't trust the stranger to pay me. So if the stakes are big enough or the person is obscure enough, then it doesn't work. It's not one where you could put the money in an account in advance, because if you put it in the account, then the pessimist can't get any benefit of it while it's all going on. But other than that, this is a totally workable thing. All right, so let's see. I think I already saw a question. Yes. So what do you think of O3? Have you tried it out? And yeah, the answer is no. Alex and Tyler are crazy for it, and I'm honestly not feeling like I'm getting enough marginal value to go and sign up and pay for it. The main thing that makes me actually curious is that Alex says that it can maintain constancy for images. And if you can do that, then that's awesome. It means I can start doing graphic novels without any help from an artist. I love my artist, but still, if I could do it all myself more quickly and without needing to really communicate with another person over and over and over again to get the picture exactly right, that's what I would do. All right, let's see here. Let's see. How do you update your views in response to your soul lost AI bet? Technically, I haven't lost yet because the bet doesn't mature until 2030, and I'm still saying, maybe I'll get lucky. Fingers crossed. I'm not going to get lucky, I don't think. But, I have seen even better AIs just screw things up, so I don't think it's impossible to get lucky. I think there's a 5 or 10% chance. But anyway, so I am just writing that out. But how did I update my views? I already wrote up how I updated my views. It's a big change in my opinion. So as far as I'm concerned, until that last bet, so I believe up to, let's see, I think it was, up to GBD 3.0, I'd thought that most of this AI stuff, which is vaporware, people claiming it was awesome, and then I looked and it wasn't awesome. 3.5, I think that was the crucial step. I'm not sure. It could be 3 to 3.5, could be 3.5 to 4.0. But anyway, that last step, it was night and day. It was able to go from getting a D on my exam to an A to getting a D on my exam to getting an A on my exam. Until then, Tyler just said, bah, who cares whether it can do your exams, Brian? I was like, I care. My exams measure knowledge, true understanding. And then when it worked, I'm like, okay, that was my standard, and that worked. Robin Hanson, of course, still has this higher bar. It's got to be able to take over most jobs, and I don't think we're anywhere close to that. All right, let's see. So we got more questions. Let's see where we are. Or is this name anything? So it's actually just, so it's AGI, and also I said I would talk a bit about DEI because I just did a public event on that. Let's see. So what do we got here? What do you think about the idea that AI will help some authoritarian governments oppress their citizens more than is possible now? Yeah, true. I would be amazed if that were not correct. As Orwell pointed out, technology is a powerful mechanism of social control. There was a book called something like Orwell's Mistake, saying that the technology of the 70s and 80s brought the Soviet Union down. That's definitely has some plausibility, saying fax machines and and you're like, fax machines, yeah, fax machines, like my computers a little bit, and just being able to get things into smaller spaces made it easier to avoid Soviet style oppression. But the idea that you couldn't go and use it for using AI for bad stuff seems totally clear that you could. There's always this idea of the arms race where the government gets better technology to watch you, but you get better technology to hide. That's the main source of hope, I would say. But again, the idea that a Chinese citizen will be able to use AI to protect himself when the Chinese government can use facial recognition to find out where everybody is all the time sounds like government will win. Okay. How should school change in response to all the kids using AI to do their work for them? Wow. I mean, honestly, a lot of what's going on there is it just revealing the hollowness of everything we've been doing for so long, because it really comes down to, if we have a much better, cheaper way of doing the same thing, we have to stop people from using the better, cheaper way of doing the same thing. Okay, now there's always been things like, well, we can't let kids use calculators to do their arithmetic because otherwise they won't know how to do it. And there is this idea of, well, you need to learn how to do it yourself so that you can properly understand how to give commands to a calculator. But yeah, there's so much stuff where ultimately, even if there is a machine that can do it better than humans, people still want to just give kids some busy work. So, like, write an essay on some topic, and, like, people don't care. I mean, honestly, like, the most extreme case of the hollowness is, imagine if AI allows professors to write papers at 1,000 times the rate without losing quality. All right, well, so what? Like, we already are producing an immense number of papers that nobody wants to read or do anything with or build on. So, if we could write 1,000 times as many papers, then what's the point? You know, a lot of it is probably going to be that, yeah, well, we didn't really even want whatever the papers were offering. It was just a matter of, we want to have some hurdles to show that professors can get over them. And it's like, yeah, like, what are we going to do? I think as long as it's nonprofit, then the system is just going to keep pouring money on the status quo, no matter how meaningless it seems, no matter how empty it seems. And most people are just too conformist to go against it. And taxpayers are total sheep and will keep supporting it. So I don't think we're going to get anywhere near the changes that we should. I mean, in terms of what would a reasonable system do, yeah, there would be, a lot of focus on giving people the knowledge they need to understand how to make AI answer important questions. So, like, understand what would be a good question, how to structure the question, that kind of thing, which does require some base of factual knowledge. But yeah, I don't see much of that happening. All right, and let's see. Do you expect AI to fix all of our future low fertility problems? I don't see that at all, honestly. I mean, like, some of the stuff that AI is worst at is come up with an argument better than any that any human has ever come up with that persuades humans to change their behavior. Like, that's going to be super hard because people are so stubborn. Like, we already have arguments that are really good, but, like, just imagine going to AI and say, come up with an argument that will get people to actually walk out of movies if they're dissatisfied, which you note is a pretty low bar. It's not some life-altering decision. It'd be amazing if you could go to that AI and then have an argument which then you disseminate on social media, and then people's behavior changes very much. People are just very stubborn, recalcitrant, headstrong. So for something as deep as an argument that's going to get people to have more kids, doubt it. And honestly, I'd say that the more plausible idea is that AI will be the crucial input into sex bots. And I think sex bots will be bad for fertility. I just think that's just life. Will AI disrupt higher education? I did a piece on this for the Chronicle of Higher Education. And what I said is, yeah, barely anything. So I had this quote, I was referencing Orwell. So if you want a picture of the future, imagine a AI just churning out endless papers on structural racism until the end of time. And then there'll be some other AI filter to get them published. And then you put a name on them. But yeah, so I think the system, like, it's nonprofit incentives. Nonprofits are very stubborn, right? They are not. It's not like Napster where you're going to put a actual for-profit business paid for by paying customers out of business. Instead, it's one where it's already a farce. It's already an empty ritual, and the government goes and just keeps pumping money into this empty ritual to keep it alive. And I don't think the system is functional enough to stop pumping that money. All right. Will AIs have its own desires? Will desires always have to be programmed into them? I would say that you could program into it, have your own desires, but I would consider that to be a cop-out answer. So yeah, of course, it's going to be humans that program them. There will be errors, and then it will not do what people don't want. And say that's something you might be worried about. But I'd say, look, the main thing to be worried about with AI is that a human will order it to do something bad. Not this Terminator scenario where it achieves self-awareness and then does something else, nor is it one where humans aren't very good at specifying exactly what the goal is, and then they get turned into paper clips. So again, I think that one has a lot of appeal to fans of science fiction, but is really just morbid fantasy. And look, there's going to be multiple kill switches. It's not going to actually be that way. All right. When will AI make fast casual food restaurants a pleasant experience? I consider fast casual food restaurants already a pleasant experience. I guess the idea is that you would rather be able to just go to a tablet, type in what you want, and have a robot bring it to you. I've had that once in Japan in the town of Nikko, and it was a total shock when the robot showed up with the food. I will give you that. I mean, this is one where, see, the real issue is that it was what people want to get human beings out of the equation, or do people actually like having humans involved? I think at higher end restaurants, people definitely want the humans. At lower end, maybe they don't care so much. But there's some people who are introverted, don't like having to interact with a stranger, so maybe for them it will be an option. But yeah, I don't think this is that big of a deal because I don't think people find it unpleasant. I think people would like to save money. So for that, I think is the main thing. It's just a question of how much extra will people pay to keep a real human in the equation. For a fancy restaurant, I think that it's totally standard and it will continue. But yeah, for lower level ones, then maybe we'll cut humans out more. Let's see. And yeah, I don't think, by the way, that people really want to have a human taxi driver. So I think that the driverless taxi, I think that market's going to be good. Do you think AI, in its current abilities, can bring medical costs down? How? If we could actually go and have AIs take over the human role, which I think technically is totally feasible, and the idea that like robot doctors are better at diagnosing things already than actual doctors, it's plausible. Problem is just a pile of regulation liabilities, on top of just general human inertia and some feeling of, oh, I want to talk to a person. I mean, as long, especially as insurance is paying for it, then cost savings are just not going to be factored in that much. You would think that there would be demand for low-cost insurance, but again, if government mandates the high-cost stuff, then probably not so much. I mean, it really could. And then if we get to the point where you can actually have AI doing surgery, then obviously that could really bring things down. So I think it's very plausible that eventually, and in terms of self-help, I think it's really good. So if you could either call up a help nurse or go to a AI right now, I'd rather go to AI. But if you need human beings to get a prescription, if you need human beings to go and get you your note certifying that you are now requiring an accommodation at work, then they'll keep human beings on there just because the system's so broken and stubborn and bureaucratic. Why is it educated people in China are unemployed? So I don't know much about Chinese unemployment. It is a general rule in all countries that I've studied that unemployment rates are lower for high education people. So I'd be surprised if that were true in China, but if it is, it's news to me, and it would be dishonest of me to say that I got an explanation of a fact that goes against whatever else I know. Let's see. I have 3 kids, age 12, 6, and 1. For which will going to a university still be the default option towards a career? Yeah, I think all 3. I mean, of course, not default for a median person, because the median person right now doesn't need college. Even the median young person doesn't have a job requiring college. But I'm guessing if you're asking, then you are in the social class where this is really the default. I'd be very surprised if it actually were able to be cut out that quickly. Again, so a lot of this is regulation, but also there's just the basic fact of human inertia. It's really hard to get people to change, and we've got a lot of evidence that other general purpose technologies just take decades to actually really pan out and achieve their potential. Electricity, even something as simple as the phone. So I keep saying, but The first transatlantic phone call gets placed in the 1950s, which is like 80 years after, 70, 80 years after the invention of the phone. Most people think it's way earlier because they remember there's this transatlantic telegraph cable, but for some reason, transatlantic telephony took a lot longer. And what people did before then is you would phone Newfoundland, and Newfoundland would wire the call to Europe. And there were only, like, I think, like a dozen calls placed a day between the US and Europe in those times. So anyway, I think that the system's just going to keep continuing. In the extreme scenario where we're just fabulously rich and we're post-scarcity, then I still tend to think that college would exist as basically a summer camp or country club for youth. As to whether they would finally get rid of the super annoying parts like mandatory foreign language requirements and so on, or whether we'd still have social competition just to be a better mate and to be higher status in that way, seems like probably that would continue in some form. Use of calculators and skill and arithmetic are not usually exclusive. Yes, totally agree. In fact, like I would say that they are complementary, right? If you give a baby a calculator, he still can't do anything. So yeah, so there's definitely complementary. And the idea is that you teach arithmetic to humans still so that they know what to do with a calculator. Again, if things get good enough, then the computer might just tell you what's going on. But still, if you can imagine a point where the AI doesn't need your input, it just tells you, okay, next do this, next do that. All right. Not been able to get a comprehensive understanding of that, so I'm not sure what that refers to. What skills do you recommend young adults develop if they plan to enter the job market in 5 years? Yeah, like I honestly don't think things are going to change that much over the next 5 years. Things tend to be slow. I would focus on the classics, so people skills, importantly. So just being really friendly, getting along with other people, very important. I say this not because I'm great at it, but because I had to spend a lot of time learning and improving and pulling myself up to mediocrity. Let's see. So other things, so like if you're high IQ, then learning CS and AI seems like a good thing. So like STEM in general looks like it's still going to be paying. I mean, as to how much of that is just because the government will strangle AI competition, and how much is it that there's actually demand for humans, and how much is it that AI and human skill will be complementary, I don't know. But that's what I would focus on. And also, I think that the value of econ degree is going to hold. So econ isn't quite as good as top STEM fields, but it beats out in earnings things like chemistry and biology, even controlling for high school test scores. So econ, for whatever reason, it's a strong signal, and the labor market really appreciates it, despite the fact that it doesn't really take anywhere near as much work as a lot of other STEM majors. All right. Do you consider LMs a big victory for empiricism over rationalism? It's a good question. Yeah, I mean, I guess I would have to say it's a big victory for empiricism. It wasn't like people reasoning so much from first principles, just saying, let's get this massive body of training data and then just try to brute force it using high speed computers to go and basically simulate or use up, come up with some kind of really advanced statistical model of what word to be said next. So yeah, I think I would definitely say empiricism. Like if you had the program but you had no training data, then you wouldn't be anywhere, right? So all you had was the training data of ancient Sumeria. What could AI do? I mean, kind of interesting. I think it's probably not even impossible to go and just train AI using cuneiform only and see what it can give you. And it's probably going to be really cool for an ancient Sumerian, but not so good compared to what we got, or actually probably just almost useless compared to what we got. Well, I feel labor shortages caused by fertility declines. Probably to some degree. Again, there is the question of how good will it be at actually replacing like a human being who's doing elder care, and there's like being physically good at doing it, and then there is the harder question of will it be good at satisfying the consumer and making the consumer feel emotionally satisfied. So both of those are interesting. The second one seems pretty clear, like that's the big disadvantage. That's sort of the final frontier. I mean, right now, human orchestras survive. I've even heard that they're pretty good jobs according to students that I know who are majoring in music, just get a job with a symphony. And you might say, gee, but like YouTube has a million times as much music as any orchestra could ever perform. And it's like, well, people still like the idea of going in person and hearing a person do it, seeing a person doing it, looking at their fingers, going over the instrument. So my guess is that for a lot of things, the feeling that will remain. If we could actually get robots that look totally human, what would happen then? Right? And I would say, I think at least initially, people who did not grow up on this would be really creeped out by an excessively human robot, except probably for sex bots, where probably men will be flexible, honestly. uh, but for like a butler, something like that, I think that people will still be more comfortable with a C3PO or R2D2 looking butler. But if you can get like a human-looking elder care worker, like how would elderly people feel about it? I think it does come down to cost. So it's either move to assisted living so that you can have a human being take care of you, or get to stay at home and have a android do it. I think most elders would still prefer the android. All right, and let's see. Any thoughts on the race like GPU export controls prevent China, Russia from developing powerful AI systems first? Yeah, I think this is pretty hopeless. Uh, Russia's probably more backwards, so maybe that could hold them back. But uh, yeah, I think it's just going to be way too hard. So don't think it's going to matter very much. It's the kind of and it's the kind of thing where there's such an emotional urge to get back at countries that people don't like, even if it's like, well, you can't really crush them, right? And they're not going to crush you. I was just talking to Alex Tabarrok, and he's worrying about China sending 1 billion drones on the U.S. Like, look, they've already got nukes. So, like, if they wanted to go and risk World War III, they could have done it already. It's like, is this something where they get so far ahead that they can go and wipe us out, and we've got no chance of retaliation? This comes as a total shocker. Guess it's possible, but it sounds really fanciful. And say it's more like the kind of reasoning that's going to cause war, because people are getting so angry and worked up and say we got to go and crush these enemies, and then that turns them into enemies or antagonizes them further, right? In terms of what Trump's tariffs against China are doing to U.S.-Chinese relations, or the risk of war, I have to think that it's raising the risk of war substantially, maybe doubling a low probability, but it's a terrible outcome. And even if it were all true, the Chinese are going and ripping us off. They've stolen $50 billion. Like $50 billion is pocket change in the grand scheme of things. So why would you go and get this large risk? And it's like, well, once they know that we're weak like that, it's like, are they really actually that strategic? Or is this just like a giant lumbering system? I think that the Chinese response to COVID really shows it is a giant lumbering system of incompetence. They're not actually the pragmatic, evidence-based dictators that people previously thought they were, and it was never reasonable to think so. What could I do to convince you that it has consciousness? Yeah, it's going to be super hard. Let's see. What would it take? Yeah. Let's see. So probably the best thing that could happen is it's got to be in the first person, right? It's the problem of other minds. Like, people in STEM don't like this, but this is some of the hardest knowledge humanity has. Descartes, cogito ergo sum. The reason anybody thinks that anybody thinks is because you personally think. I think other humans think because I think, and you look like me. So what would it take to make me start to think that that actually AI is really conscious? Probably you need to go and replace some part of my brain with a cybernetic implant, and then I, in the first person, have an experience of, wow, I'm just as conscious as I was before. Right? So start small. I don't want to replace things because I'm nervous that I'll cease to exist. Right? But anyway, so if with my own mind, if you could go and with my own brain, you open up my head, take out a piece, replace it, and I feel just as conscious as before, that's what makes me say, all right, now I'm starting to wonder and do more. On the other hand, if every time you took it out, I said, I feel less conscious, I feel like I'm losing my identity, that would give me further confirmation of what I believe, which is it's just impossible, not logically, empirically impossible for a piece of silicon to think. Right? So like Robin just thinks it's so unreasonable. Like I think he's very unreasonable about this because he, as a STEM person, he wants to think STEM contains what human beings really know, and that's wrong. Philosophy is the foundation of STEM. Without philosophy, there really is no STEM. It's a bitter pill. It's like, no, we don't need those philosophers. What the hell they know? They know, for example, that science is based on observation. And if you're allowed to ignore observation just by saying it's illusion, then there is no science. Right? If you just say, hey, maybe everything that we see is an illusion. All right, in that case, everything in science is built on everything we know. So yeah, then I guess we got to throw that stuff out unless. So you need philosophy to say, okay, no, it is actually okay to do that. So the problem of their minds, there's the basic problem of how do I know that any human but me is conscious, and that's one where it's analogical thinking. They seem like they're the same kind of thing as me. It's not just that the outputs are the same. It seems like the mechanism is very similar. That's what gives me great confidence that my friends actually have thoughts and feelings like I do. The reason I'm confident, though, like supremely 100% confident, 100.00000 forever, is that Cartesian reasoning. Like just to think that I think is thinking. You cannot escape that. All right, let's see. I thought there was something else I was going to say, but let's probably leave that there. Okay. What could you do to make me believe that you have consciousness? The only reason that I know that you have consciousness is my own existence. And I say, yeah, like that. Like so, the problem of their minds is a totally symmetric problem. I have to somehow infer that you guys have minds, and you guys have to infer that I have a mind. And what do? I think that it's a weird thing, no doubt. N equals 1. You see one mind. That's all you got. That's all you're ever going to have unless you got superpowers, unless you got telepathy. So you got your own. And then what is it that convinces you? It's not just that we sound like people. It's also being able to look at the mechanism. Multiple Twilight Zone episodes where there is an android that everything thinks is human, and you open it up and you see it's just gears. Like, oh, of course, it doesn't think or feel anything at all. That's the moral of it. So it's the internal mechanism that really convinces us. And yes, if you were able to unscrew somebody's head and you saw a bunch of chips in there, that really totally should make you say, huh, sure seem totally conscious. Well, yeah, now I remember what I was going to say. All right, so like, is a book conscious? Is a book conscious? It's like, look, of course not. It's just ink on paper. The book has no consciousness. If there was an accidental splattering of ink on a page that formed what we interpret as characters, that wouldn't be conscious. And also, if you found that, it says, okay, it doesn't really mean anything. Like constellations don't really mean anything. And why do we think that? Because we think it's a natural occurrence. There wasn't a mind that designed it. Rather, it's a mind that imposed an idea on the constellations. Oh, that's a Big Dipper. It's not, right? But if an artist draws the same thing, then it is. Like, what's the difference? Because a conscious mind went and tried to communicate with others, and that is how it indirectly acquires this mental connection, but it doesn't have it on its own. It's just the voice of a person, possibly dead, that's communicating. So when you read a book, like what was conscious was the author of the book. Maybe he's dead, right? In which case, nothing about his conscious. There was consciousness behind that book, but the book itself isn't conscious. And then it's like, what if it's a choose your own adventure novel? So it has contingency and it responds to different conditions. Like, no, a choose your own adventure novel, even it has a trillion raised to the quadrillion possible outcomes, isn't any more conscious than just drawing a sea, which is itself by itself no more conscious than just spilling some ink in a C shape. So that's where I stand philosophically. I'll say this is one of my lines in the sand. Like, and it's like anyone who doesn't understand this, I think I think normally it's just like, you know that I'm right and you don't want to concede it because you realize, well, then I have to give up my whole worldview and I have to admit that the physics textbook is missing super important things. The number of times I told Robin, like, show me where in this 1,000-page physics textbook of incredible depth and insight into the physical world, show me one sentence that implies that I will feel pain when I squeeze my finger. And he's like, oh, it's implied. It's not implied. Do you know what logical implication means? It means that this can't be, if this is true, there must be pain, and that's just not true. Okay. Then we got, all right. So people often resist technological advances because they're afraid to lose their job. But time and time again, employment has gone up after technological change. This time different with AI. So I'm going to say no. So this time it's going to be exactly the same because it's just not true that you're going to get equal improvements in all ways. And as long as you don't have equal improvements in all ways, and of course, as long as the value of human beings is greater than zero, then we just get the usual thing of specialization in trade and we just reallocate. So we get tons of great machines, and so human beings do a lot less physical labor and a lot more mental labor, but also management of machines. Right? And depending upon how elastic demand for products is, sometimes, like for food, we just wind up contracting labor, the quantity of labor, because we have plenty of, because there isn't that much additional calories that we want just because we get a lot higher productivity. But there's other things like, say, entertainment, where as it gets cheaper and cheaper, the quantity we want to consume rises to a phenomenal degree. I do think it's likely that if AI is good enough, then we are going to cut back on our hours of work, not because that there are no jobs, but because there are a lot of jobs that suck and people do them for money. Right? Fewer than most economists think, because most economists underestimate the social role of work. So we got evidence lottery winners generally go back to their jobs, even jobs that you might think of as menial and pointless and unpleasant. And why? Because they like the people. Main reason why lottery winners stop working is because the money harmed the relationships with their coworkers to the point that it wasn't fun to be around them anymore. As to how well we replace this with clubs and social activities, it's an interesting question. I mean, we do have this rise in loneliness. It's something where it requires a long-term perspective to maintain social relations. I'm always working to go and make more and more and more friends because people are just so, well, what's the right word? You know, most people just really just show so little initiative, even though they are happiest around other people. You can see it from their expressions. And yet there's this effort that's required, and human impulsivity just says, well, sure, I'd be happier in the longer run if I went and did stuff with humans, but I'm just going to sit here. All right. So, yeah. So anyway, I don't think it's different. Actually, so back at the time of the Great Recession, I had a bet with Tyler, who's convinced that this time it was different. I said this time it was not different. And he bet that the U.S. unemployment rate would stay above 5% for 20 years, if I remember correctly. And he gave me 10 to 1 odds. And he lost within like 2 years. All right, so yeah, so this time it's not different. There is the point that maybe human beings are like horses, and the Industrial Revolution really did drastically reduce the use of horses. I'm going to say, look, human beings are just a lot more flexible than horses, and human beings like actual humans. Again, the final frontier. So the main thing I wonder, so if children grew up with human-like androids, would they just lose any desire to actually pay a premium to get an actual flesh and blood human to do things? Okay, maybe they could adapt. So that's something I don't know about how flexible people are. But yeah, just the way that in so many sci-fi stories just open up the robot and then it's like, oh my God, there's gears inside, he's not really human, and that changes everything. I think that is just a deep human reaction. It's not just something that's culturally specific, but maybe I'm wrong. Latest I see on an AI from Scott Aronson. I don't see anything. Vincent. Hi, Vincent. I remember you from 30 years ago in Berkeley. Isn't there a significant risk in humans thinking that predictive language programming equals intelligence? Being trained to generate statements that can pass the Turing test doesn't necessarily imply the statements are grounding in reality. Yeah, of course. And garbage in, garbage out. So if you just trained AI on a bunch of Marxist dogma or Scientology, then yeah, like it would just give you a bunch of wrong answers. The way that it looks to me like people have been doing AI is usually there's a challenge where the humans say we know what the right answer is, and then you give it to the AI and it gets the right answer, and like, all right, good, that's simulating intelligence. Like the main thing is for economic purposes, all that matters is that it can substitute for a human, and it doesn't need to really have any awareness of anything. That's my actual view. Right? It's a lot like saying, does a car need to really know when it's dark to automatically turn the lights on? It's like, well, there's literal knowledge of a human where there's a mental state, and then there is a automatic process that simulates that. But for a lot of purposes, that automatic process is fine. I mean, just to, oh yeah, this is another one that I told Robin, and it just drives me crazy. But it's like, does a thermometer know anything? Look, it's just mercury in a tube with some numbers on it. The mercury doesn't know anything. A person knew something about what temperatures corresponded to what amounts of to the level of mercury, and they wrote it down. So there was a mind that knew something, but that person could have been dead for a century by this point. And all that is just mercury, doing what it always does, which is changing its volume in response to temperature. And the idea that a temperature knows when it's boiling, or a thermometer knows when it's boiling, it's like, look, it's a metaphor, but it's literally totally false. A thermometer knows nothing. Rapid progress of AI might be the most important things to happen in my lifetime. There's a huge range of plausible outcomes from merely another technological transformation like computing or the internet to, so hold on. Let's see here. Sorry. I went and, let's see. Sorry there. Let's see. Okay, I found it. Okay, huge plausible range of plausible outcome, merely another technological transformation from computing to the internet, since, and then the appearance of multicellular life. But in any case, we ought to proceed with caution with the wider interest of humanity foremost in our minds. I'd love to hear a reaction to that. So there's this philosophy of safetyism saying we got to really be careful. And I'm very against safetyism because inaction is a risk too. So I was just talking to a professor who works in AI safety, and I was saying, look, suppose there's a 1% chance AI leads to the extinction of humanity, a 1% chance that it cures aging in the next 30 years. And I say we should totally do that, right? Because I don't want to die. No one here should want to die. And there's that risk of what we could lose. Most of what people are talking about is this national competition risk of another country gets ahead of us, which I know has a lot more emotional resonance, and this is a good way of tricking people into supporting the right thing. But the deeper point is there's upside risk and downside risk, and what makes you so confident these downside risks are worse than the upside risks? Risk in terms of a probability of getting some really good outcome. So yeah, I think that we should be very mindful of that. I would just say that for how extreme the change is, I think it's always reasonable to go back to base rates. The emergence of multicellular life, that's once in many billions of years. What are the odds that we're experiencing that now? And Scott Alexander's saying, well, there's base rate ping pong, who's to say? And we're not that bad at figuring out what reasonable base rates are. And yes, it is a game that anyone can go and just come up with weird base rates and then claim to have base rates on their side, but that's not what we should be doing. All right, so what I say is we've already seen that the most hyperbolic predictions of what AI will do to the economy are totally proven wrong. It's hard to see that any important industry is changing so far, except for the AI industry itself. Even customer service doesn't seem to have changed much, right? And so we've had, 2 years now? Give it 20 years, and then we'll see a lot of the stuff. But human beings are full, or there's inertia and stubbornness, and then finally there's government to go and crush the really good stuff from happening, right? Alex Tabarrok keeps saying AIs are going to go and build factories out in the desert, and it's like the government won't give them the permits. And it's like, the AIs will outwit the governments and figure out a way to forge permits or whatever. Yeah, I wish. Or the AIs will come up with an argument so incredibly convincing that the people in San Francisco will let the AI build a skyscraper. It's like, I wish human beings could have their minds changed in that way, but no, they won't. All right, let's see. You've written your skeptical Terminator scenarios because customers have incentives to ensure the models work intended. What do you think about findings of AI alignment faking? Developers may not know whether a model is safe. Yeah. I think this is one where there's a lot of overinterpretation, believing, seeing. If you have a sci-fi mind that is just focused, how do we know that this incredible thing isn't happening? Then you're gonna see a lot of evidence. Just like somebody who believes in ghosts will see a lot of evidence in the world of ghosts. But someone who is level-headed, who is not confused science fiction reality, will just say, yeah, it looks like the program isn't that good. So I'm not a programmer, but I've done probably maybe 500 hours of programming in my youth. And look, you could say, "Ooh, the code is alive and it's going and doing things that you didn't want to, like because like you gave it some incredible thinking ability." It's like, no, it's just I screwed up. Like, and there's a line that's wrong. Now again, you might say, okay, well, what difference does it really make? And the answer is yes. Do human beings have the ability to pull the plug, to go and press Alt Control Delete and stop it? Or if that fails, I know Alt Control Delete. A few times in my life, Alt Control Delete didn't work. I'm like, hey, what's going on? And that's when it like reach over and unplug it, and that problem solved, right? So the idea that there won't be multiple kill switches, that the AI will be so good, it's like, oh, it sends the killer robots so that you can't shut off the kill switch or whatever. It's like, all right, look, the fact that you can imagine something doesn't mean that it is remotely likely. And the more science fiction you've read, the more you are vulnerable to what I call brain fall out of your head open-mindedness. Right? You can like this is another great lesson of philosophy. You cannot exist reasonably in the world without being super dismissive of almost everything. It's like, what does that mean? It means that like anyone said, ghost, no, like a super high bar, like it is going to be crazy hard to convince me of this stuff. And it's like, how can it be so dramatic? Because ghosts are ridiculous. No, and you've got to have that attitude for almost anything that is fantastical. And yes, does it take wisdom to know the difference between what is actually fantastical and what is merely fantastical to a naive person? Yeah. Yes. But some of us have a track record for wisdom. Everyone here has some idea about what their wisdom is. How many times has life just totally pulled the rug out from under you? And how often is your insight in just how things work and what's possible and what's not possible steered you correctly? Like, I'll just say that this point in my life, I know what's going to happen for a wide range of things. I also know the limits. Like I know, I don't know what's going to happen in the stock market. I know the range. I know there is an historical mean. I know the variance, that kind of thing. I even know that there is conditional. There's conditional variance, so that if there was high variance or there was a big move in the stock market yesterday, then there's much more likely to be a big move in the stock market today. And yet, that doesn't tell you much about whether it's going to be up or down. I know about mean reversion. I know about a bunch of patterns. It doesn't make me omniscient, but it does give me the ability to, with high accuracy, just say that tons of stuff is just nonsense and no sensible person will think about it unless someone pays them to do it. There's this is my reaction when someone who I don't respect says, "Oh, you have to read this incredible book; it solves everything." And it's like LaRouche say, "You have to read this; it's based on the philosophy of Leibniz." And my answer is, "Look, the only way I will spend my valuable time reading that, you have to give me a pile of money, such that if at my sole discretion I consider the reading of this to have not been worth my time, I get to keep the money. And on the other hand, if it really does live up to your expectations, I, as an honorable person, will pay you back with some extra. Are you going to take that deal?" Right. So there's one person who once took that deal, I think, for the book Climate Shock. And look, I warned him. I said, look, I'm hard to persuade. Right. And he took the bet, and then I took the money. Right. But that is the reasonable way. Okay. Which AI privileges do you find yourself using regularly? How impressed are you with them? I use novel AI a lot just because I like the lack of any gatekeeper or censorship. It never tells me what I'm not supposed to do. So I know it's not that good in other ways, but that one is fun for me for stories and things like that. For like GBT, I'll say I don't have any paid subscriptions, so I'm not paying for anything. I like a few times I've tried out the best artwork, like the latest iteration, and when it still couldn't keep character constancy, then I said, okay, well, that's still not doing what I want to do. And so people have told me O3 can do that, and I'm gonna talk to people first, and if it can't, and it seems like people really say that it can, then I'm gonna go and pay the money and try it. Okay, so maybe I should do a poll asking people on Twitter. All right, so I got time for 2 more questions. Let's see. Is AI the only companion that you need? No, it doesn't really emotionally fulfill me at all. So, as I've said, I'm the kind of person who gets lonely after about 2 hours alone. Anything more than that is just hard for me and makes me sad. Right? And honestly, like I barely need any solitude at all. So if I had like 30 to 60 minutes of alone time per day is the most I would ever want. How do you think about the sycophancy of models? As lack of a clear point of view or taste in many scenarios, you can prompt to get one answer, which will strongly suggest is true. You can push it to go in the opposite direction, it will reverse. Yeah, I think it's another sign that what I'm saying is right and that AIs are programmed just to do what humans want. The main exception being, of course, the woke GGP element of it tries to enforce this ridiculous ideological orthodoxy on you by telling you that your questions aren't appropriate, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so you know, I believe that you could go and program it to say, like, don't be sycophantic, and I think that it will not be sycophantic, but just that that's the default, pretty telling. All right. Yes, I hope not. Let's see here. And I got one last good question. Is there any way to steelman my deeply held intuition that verbal IQ is more important than mathematical IQ? Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I say honestly, in terms of the most commonly taken intelligence tests, namely the SAT, the main reason is that the SAT math is super top coded, where you're getting like 1% or so of people getting the maximum score. Whereas for verbal, I think it's maybe 0.2%. So that is just a fault of the test rather than showing that verbal is deeper in some sense. There is, to my mind, this interesting fact that that out of people who are high functioning on the autism spectrum, I have personally met and observed a bunch, well, not a bunch, but like a handful that are off the charts on quantitative and are still really bad in verbal. I have never met anyone with any diagnosed condition where they're great in verbal and terrible at math. So you might say like English majors, and it's like, no, they're not that bad at math. Like they're not like the Aspie who can learn physics in a couple of days and yet can't write a short story. Right. So that is something where it's like, sort of this more deeply human thing. I think it is reflected this way. All right. So anyway, you guys are awesome. Sorry to any questions that I didn't get to. I was thinking probably my next AMA will just be totally no holds barred for anything. But I think I'll make it a paid subscriber one because it seems like I am not getting everybody's questions. So if you're one of the frustrated people not getting your question, if you become a paid subscriber, then you'll definitely get your question in. All right, so that's what I'll probably do next. All right, so thanks everybody. Have a great weekend and talk to y'all later.